They laughed when she opened a wooden ammo case at a billion-dollar contract trial, muttering that she looked like a hobbyist who'd wandered in with antique brass and no scope. One tech called her a prop. Another asked if she knew what caliber meant. She spoke to no one, fired a single round, and was dismissed before her result even loaded. But when the official data surfaced revealing her bullet had outperformed every corporate entry in thermal resistance, accuracy, and group cohesion, the same men who ignored her were forced to recall her name. She didn't demand credit. She didn't take questions. She taped one graph to the table, repacked her case, and left behind a round etched with 2 letters. Now, she's called a myth, a benchmark, a mistake the system will never forget. In the end, she didn't speak at all. Her bullet did. The sun pressed down on the dry earth, casting long shadows across rows of white tents and brushed aluminum benches. The military test range was alive with movement vendors in branded polos adjusting rifle displays, technicians wheeling cases of prototype ammunition, uniformed observers scanning clipboards. Above the noise of drones and equipment, the occasional snap of a test shot cracked through the air, clean and sharp. Mara walked alone, her boots pressing soft tracks into the sand. She carried no gear beyond a faded canvas satchel and a rectangular wooden case with a cracked lid. No logos marked her clothes. No one looked at her twice, except to wonder why she was walking so close to the firing lanes. A handler glanced up, nudged a colleague, and muttered something. They both laughed. One of them called out, "You with logistics." She didn't answer. She approached the check-in table at the far end of the row, where a clerk scanned the list of approved entrants. Without looking up, he asked for her vendor ID. She passed him a folded document. He unfolded it slowly, glanced at her face, then at the wooden case at her side. He hesitated before stamping the page. "Independent?" he asked. She nodded once. He shook his head and handed it back. "Lane, 17. Good luck." The comment wasn't kind. As Mara crossed the clearing, the wind picked up, throwing sand across the metal benches. Contractors ducked into shade tents, adjusting optics and tightening suppressors. Her lane was almost empty, an unused platform beside a line of polished composite crates. She set the wooden case on the steel tray and opened it. The interior was lined with hand-cut foam, and nestled inside were 3 small rounds. Each was silver, unmarked, and cleanly hand-rolled. Their cases polished to a faint brushed finish. Brushed. From behind her, laughter rippled. Someone said, "Is that driftwood or ammunition?" Another added, "Maybe she's building a charm bracelet." She ignored them. She removed the rounds one by one, laying them carefully on the tray. Her movements were slow but efficient, the kind that come from habit, not hesitation. She checked nothing twice, adjusted nothing. One vendor across the lane muttered to a colleague, "She doesn't even have a scope. This is going to be rich." No one noticed the initials etched faintly into the base of each round. Mara sat on the edge of the bench, resting her hands in her lap. She didn't look around. The clipboard that had stamped her entrance sat on the edge of the table, still marked with the time of her scheduled shot. She had 15 minutes. No one would call her forward. No one would prepare the range for her. But she waited, silent, surrounded by heat, dust, and the sound of other people's certainty. Across the field, test rifles gleamed in the sun like trophies. Behind her, murmurs rose again. Somewhere nearby, a camera turned off. Her rounds remained untouched on the tray, and Mara waited, calm, still, already underestimated. Mara's name was called through a crackling loudspeaker, and it was wrong. The announcer stumbled over it, clipped the syllables, and didn't bother to correct himself. The chuckle that followed wasn't subtle. One vendor leaned over to another and whispered, "Placeholder, entry. Watch this." Someone else added, "Well, At least it's her turn. We can get lunch after. The air was thick with heat and assumption. She rose without a word. Her steps toward the line were even and deliberate. There was no handler trailing her, no assistant carrying gear, no company banner flapping behind her station. Just Mara, her wooden case already laid out, and 3 silver rounds waiting in silence. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. The previous shooter, a decorated rep from a well-known supplier, had exited to applause after a 5-minute walkthrough of his guided ammunition, complete with video replay, trajectory overlays, and group zoom commentary from a digital analyst. His display case gleamed. His uniform was crisp. His shot data was already uploaded and shared to 3 procurement feeds. Mara brought none of that. She stepped to the bench wearing her faded coat, rolled sleeves, and worn boots. The firing officer frowned as he looked at her form. "You'll be using that platform?" he asked, gesturing to the simple bolt-action rifle resting on the rack beside her lane. She nodded. "Manual calibration?" he asked. No response. A tech shook his head. "Okay then. 1 shot, load and fire, range is clear." Someone near the press tent muttered, "Hope the camera's rolling. Could be good blooper material." Another laughed. "Old-timer special. Look at that thing." Mara didn't respond. She stepped behind the bench, lifted the rifle with both hands, and checked nothing. No wind flag, no eye relief adjustment, no recalibration for temperature or barrel expansion. She inserted a single round with care and closed the bolt. The slide clicked once. The field went quiet for a moment, though not out of respect, more out of secondhand embarrassment. Her eyes never moved from the scope. Her breathing didn't change. She pulled the trigger. The shot cracked across the field. A faint metallic ping came a moment later, but it was too soft to draw attention. No visual cue lit up on the nearby screen. No tracer trail. No data overlay. Just one clean sound. Then silence. The officer blinked. "That's your shot." Mara nodded and stepped back. The brass casing rolled gently across the bench and landed near the edge. A tech reached for it, glanced at it briefly, and tossed it in the spent bin with a flick. "All yours," he said without looking up. She returned to her seat without a word. The tray of her remaining rounds remained untouched. The screen meant to display her grouping never refreshed. Her lane's camera feed cut off seconds after she walked away. Someone at the far edge of the test tent logged the entry under a tag. No measurable data. "That'll teach her to show up with farm gear," someone said, loudly enough to catch stifled laughter. The range director turned toward the next team. "Next demo, Group 2, load up." The clock reset. The test proceeded. Mara sat alone again, her hands resting on her thighs, eyes half closed. She did not flinch when they laughed. She did not correct anyone. Her rifle remained at rest beside her, unpolished but perfectly balanced. One junior staffer glanced at her tray and hesitated. He looked as if he might speak, but an older supervisor clapped him on the shoulder and pulled him away. "Come on. There's real data to review." The moment was gone. Her casing lay buried under dozens of others, her name forgotten, her presence dismissed. But her bullet had landed, clean, unshaken, precisely where she intended, and no one had seen it. The bench where Mara had fired her shot was already being wiped down when she returned. A technician with a branded rag was brushing dust from the metal tray, not because it needed cleaning, but because it was routine. Her casing, which had rolled into the tray's corner, was picked up between 2 fingers and held aloft like a found coin. "We'll frame this one," he joked to a colleague. "From our charity round." He laughed, then tossed it into a dented bin with a hollow clink. No one looked twice. The clipboard that held her sign-in had been shuffled to the bottom of the stack. A red stamp bled across the corner, "Void not viable." An admin assistant clipped it onto the back of a fresh packet for a larger vendor arriving next hour. The pages that held her waiver. Her ballistics method form. Her submission number all absorbed into a file no one would open again. Across the range, cameras whirred back to life. The next contractor was already in place, surrounded by 2 assistants and a brand rep, their demo trays gleaming with polished ammo types and glossy pamphlets. A team of procurement observers adjusted their visors as the next series began. One screen flashed with a calibration feed, another projected past grouping patterns. Her data had never been uploaded. Mara stood behind the shade tarp near her lane. She hadn't moved since returning. Her case sat beside her on the bench, still closed, untouched. The wood caught flecks of sunlight that filtered through the canopy, but no one glanced at it. An aide from one of the defense firms nearly tripped over the crate and scoffed, dragging it gently backward without asking. "Gotta clear this for logistics," he muttered, then looked down. "Is this cedar?" She didn't respond. A few yards away, a media representative from a defense blog was reviewing footage from earlier rounds. As he scanned timestamps, he paused briefly at hers, saw no flag, no heat data, no commentary log, and skipped it. Nothing there. He said to the tech beside him, "Some filler entry." Her rifle had already been returned to the public rack, resting unevenly between a carbon fiber sniper rig and a chrome semi-auto showcase. No tag marked it. One test officer asked what unit had logged it. Another shrugged and replied, "Some freelancer's thing. It's already out." Mara took a small notebook from inside her coat pocket. The spine was cracked, corners curled, paper soft at the edges. She opened to a folded graph hand-drawn, smudged, marked with careful arcs, labeled in shorthand. She turned it over, placed a strip of tape along the edge, and walked slowly back to her lane. The bench had already been reloaded with another shooter's gear. A new tray, empty and clean, had been set. She ducked beneath it, pressed the graph under the lip, and smoothed it flat. The tape caught. She checked one corner, then stepped back. "Miss," a supervisor called from behind her, clipboard in hand. "We've got a hard time window. Can I have you move past the zone? Please." She nodded once and walked without looking back. The graph remained where she had left it. In the briefing tent nearby, the same supervisor showed her entry sheet to a visiting colonel. "Non-conforming," he explained. "No supporting platform. Minimal documentation. Failed to meet telemetry sync. I don't even know how she passed the pre-clear." The colonel didn't question it. He moved on to the major contractors who were already shaking hands and preparing pitch packets. One of them asked, "Did that mystery entry shoot already?" A woman nearby replied, "Yeah. She fired something. No data came in. Probably a blank." By mid-afternoon, Mara's lane had been fully cleared. The tarp was rolled up. The bench reset. One vendor staffer accidentally knocked over the crate again and scoffed. "Still here," he muttered. A handler shook his head and pushed it toward the edge with his boot. "Don't know who left that. Not our problem." Only one person paused, an intern wearing a badge too new for his shirt. He saw the taped graph, half tucked beneath the tray lip, and bent down to read it. He didn't understand the shorthand, but the curvature, the numbers, the perfect arcs, they didn't look like guesswork. He was about to say something when a senior analyst tapped him on the shoulder. "You're needed at the thermal tent. Let's go. Forget the scratch pad." He hesitated, then followed. The bench was left behind. Mara didn't speak the rest of the day. She left the grounds without ceremony, her crate back under one arm, her notebook closed. No one asked her where she'd parked. No one followed. By the time she reached the outer gates, the range was already deep into the next showcase. Laughter drifted behind her, louder than before, amplified by certainty and the soft comfort of confirmation bias. She crossed the final checkpoint with her badge folded in half. The guard didn't check it, just waved her through with a muttered, "Take care." Behind her, the casing that had been tossed still lay in the spent bin, pressed against dozens of others. The label on the bin read, "Scrap," and her chart remained taped to the underside of a bench no one would look at until someone had the nerve or the curiosity to ask what it was doing there. In the control hub just past midnight, The range had gone quiet except for the low hum of monitors and the rattle of distant carts being wheeled into storage. Most of the day's personnel had signed out. Only the back-end analysts remained those responsible for sorting the day's telemetry into usable graphs and composite reviews for procurement command. Screens flickered as datasets were layered and compared. Everything followed routine until a red flag flashed across 3 terminals at once. Thermal degradation testing, normally stable across controlled ammo sets, was failing at multiple pressure levels. Grouping patterns were widening, casings showing early bloom. A frustrated technician leaned back in his chair. "Run that back," he said. The software recompiled the visual overlay of rounds fired at mid-temp calibration. One chart didn't match the rest. At the far edge of the screen, a small label blinked amber sample 19, unprocessed. One analyst clicked into the record. The preview window showed a smooth trajectory path, flat thermal load, and 0 recorded deviation. No vendor was listed. "Is this from one of the new firms?" someone asked from across the room. "No," came the reply. "It's not assigned. No logo. No test profile." Another screen loaded the projectile's casing signature. The alloy composition triggered a conflict with the baseline inventory. The system flagged it as unknown. A line of text blinked user input. Manual submission. One of the analysts narrowed his eyes. "It shouldn't be here, but it's perfect." Someone brought up the timestamp. A slow-motion clip loaded silently. It showed Mara's lane, her platform, her hands sliding one round into place, the bolt closing, then the shot. The trajectory line displayed across the test field. A crisp strike. The bullet did not drift. The camera switched off 10 seconds later. The file had been marked incomplete. A young analyst wiped his screen with his sleeve and ran the data again. Still perfect. He glanced at the metadata. The tracking ID had been erased from the master vendor file. It had been categorized as filler. Metallurgy ran a side analysis. The casing alloy showed high structural retention, unusually smooth expansion, and near-zero heat warping. "We didn't make this," one of them said. "Not this cycle. Not ever." Another voice added, "It's a cold-load hybrid. It shouldn't have grouped this tight under temp stress." The room started to shift. A supervisor walked in, still carrying a half-finished energy drink. "What's going on?" he asked. One analyst turned the monitor. "You need to see this." The supervisor leaned over the desk, frowning. "What name's on the file?" No one answered. He stepped back. "Trace the round," he said. "Get me the shooter, and find the physical casing. Run the rest of her data through a clean model." But there was no rest of her data. Just one perfect shot, unlabeled, unmatched, and now too sharp to ignore. The silence in the room deepened as someone whispered, "She wasn't even on the board." Then they started to look for her. The briefing room was cold, clinical, and quiet, filled now with only the soft taps of keyboards and the measured shuffle of high-ranking boots on polished tile. The main screen displayed a single frozen frame, a silver casing mid-ejection, smoke curling behind it, the rifle still steady. In the bottom corner of the frame, her initials MB barely visible, etched into the casing base. Beneath the image, the designation now read, Sample 19, Confirmed Match. A commander stood at the front of the room, reviewing the recovered documents. Her name was there, her vendor ID, her prior submissions all marked reviewed, no action. Some even labeled redundant approach. She had submitted designs 5 times in the last 6 years. None had ever made it to a live test. Until now. The next morning, Mara walked the same path she had before, dust rising gently around her boots. Coat sleeves rolled just above her wrists. This time, no one laughed. No one asked her to move aside. She passed the registration tent without speaking. A gate officer nodded and opened the side entrance. At lane 17, the bench had been cleared and reset. A laminated copy of her original graph, once taped under the tray, now sat mounted beside the rifle rack. A colonel waited nearby, arms folded, face unreadable. "Thank you for returning," he said. She didn't reply. A technician stepped forward with a sealed evidence sleeve. Inside was the round she had fired 2 days earlier, the only one no one had watched. The casing had been recovered from the spent bin, scrubbed clean, and vacuum sealed for forensic record. The initials at the base were clearer now. MB, hand-etched, deliberate. He held the sleeve out to her. She didn't take it. Instead, she opened her crate. No one had touched it since the day she left. Someone had placed it gently behind a storage tent, still bearing her original submission tag, now upgraded with a red strip that read, "Review Under Command Directive." She removed 3 rounds. They gleamed slightly in the morning sun. She placed each on the tray with the same calm precision as before. This time, 20 people watched. Procurement officers stood behind a temporary divider. A team of defense observers occupied the upper canopy. No one filmed. No one spoke. There was no commentary. No PR staff. No marketing presence. Just air, metal, and expectation. Mara picked up the same rifle she had used before. She made no adjustments. One by one, she loaded the rounds and fired. Each shot landed clean, tight grouping, center marks, no deviation. A commander tapped the screen. Thermal. The analyst nodded. Stable across the board. Barrel shift within margin. Composition trace matches prior sample. A colonel stepped closer, watching Mara reload the final round. No computer interface, no visual aid, he said under his breath. She calibrated this by hand. Mara fired the last round, then stepped away. The technician took the tray. No cleanup, no reset, just reverence. In a far corner, one of the major vendors stepped forward. A tall man in a black branded jacket, eyes tired, words measured. "Excuse me," he said. "Ms. Blake." He tried a smile. "We'd welcome the chance to talk co-development. Perhaps partnership review." She walked past him without stopping. He lowered his hand. Behind her, the sealed casing had been placed in a soft-lined box for documentation. 2 officers reviewed it without speaking. One of them, a former testing lead, said quietly, "I saw this signature once before. Field issue prototype. Long-range temp variants. Classified back then." The younger officer nodded slowly. She brought it back. At the debrief tent, Mara waited by the edge of the presentation board. A major approached with a clipboard. "The command has authorized a technical consulting position. Flexible engagement. Design rights remain yours. No further vendor queue required." He paused. "If that's of interest." Mara looked at him for a moment. Then she opened her case, placed the remaining round back into its groove, and closed the lid. "I brought what I needed," she said, her voice even. Then she lifted the crate and turned toward the exit. An officer behind her quietly smoothed the corner of her laminated graph on the display wall. No one spoke. No one interrupted. Outside, the wind had picked up again, stirring the sand around the tent lines. As Mara passed the final checkpoint, a new technician saluted her, not out of protocol, out of instinct. Inside, procurement officials flagged 3 vendor entries for manual review. One had inflated group data, another had misrepresented thermal specs, a third had traced part of its casing blend to a batch no longer in production. The review staff moved slowly, carefully. They had learned something. When asked later how the reversal had happened, one staffer said, "It wasn't a reversal. We just started reading what she left behind." In the vault room, her graph was stored, the casing was logged, the vendor name was reinstated. But no one could remember if she had ever truly introduced herself. Only her initials remained, etched in brass, marked on the board, threaded through the silence she left behind. It started with a grainy photo posted late at night. Just a tray dented metal, 3 silver rounds laid in a clean triangle and a hand-off frame, mid-motion, no caption, no context, but one of the rounds caught the light just right, and someone noticed the faint initials at the base MB. By morning, the photo had spread to 5 defense forums and was trending under the tag War Sample 19. By midday, it was everywhere. Most assumed it was a joke at first, a forgotten entry, a ghost round from a discarded test. But then a user posted a side-by-side of the leaked image and a test range camera still from the day prior. The same tray, same casing alignment. And in the background, just out of focus, a woman in a faded coat, walking away from the bench. The theories came fast. This grouping doesn't match any active contract profile. Who submitted the hybrid cold load? Why wasn't this in the official records? Then someone found the telemetry overlay. An internal analyst, quietly anonymous, posted a screen capture of the thermal trace pattern. It was perfect. No drift, no bloom. Just a single arc with uniform distribution across 3 temperature environments. It had no signature, no brand, no accompanying PDF spec sheet, just the round itself and the trajectory. An ex-sniper posted a comment that was upvoted into legend. That round doesn't drift. I know. I've seen it before. Not since the deep vaults. Not since black sand training. No one could confirm the meaning. But it didn't matter. The conversation shifted from curiosity to reverence. Someone zoomed in on the initials again. MB. Dozens of guesses surfaced. Military ballistics. Modular bore. But then one user unearthed an old digital patent application. Denied. Handwritten notes in the margin read, "Submitted under Mara Blake." The document was 5 years old. One contractor executive deleted his social accounts the next day. Another issued a quiet press release announcing his resignation for personal reasons. A third attempted to reach out directly through an NDA and provisional licensing request. There was no reply. Instead, a podcast episode titled "The Woman with No Table" went live 3 days later. The hosts were calm, their tone reverent. They played no clips. They used no music. Just the story piecemealed from witnesses, forum posts, and one unverified interview with a junior analyst who had seen the taped graph under the bench and never said a word until now. A blogger posted a still from the range. The caption read, "We missed her name, but we'll remember her chart." At a test facility in Nevada, a lead engineer pinned a printout of the trajectory graph to the side of his workstation. When asked why, he said, "It's the first thing I've seen in years that made the math feel honest again." 1 week later, a black coin arrived in a blank envelope. No return address, no signature. Inside, it was wrapped in a single page, the label from a discarded clipboard. Void not viable. Below it, the initials MB were written again, this time in ink. The coin was smooth, matte black, and engraved on one side with a single word, "Observed." It was delivered to the intern who had once crouched under a bench and tried to read her taped graph. He didn't speak publicly about it, but he posted one photo, the coin resting on the corner of his desk, next to a blank notebook, open to the first page. The impact wasn't confined to one field. Firearms podcasts debated the return of analog ballistics. Ammunition companies received requests to explore legacy casing profiles. University labs invited guest lecturers to speak on the theoretical value of forgotten formats. None of them mentioned her by name. They didn't need to. Pilots started taping hand-drawn graphs to the inside of their cockpit lockers. Marksmen began etching initials into their practice rounds. One training unit began every live fire with a single, unaided shot. No overlays, no stabilization, calling it the Mara check. It spread without attribution. No interviews were granted. No comment was offered. She wasn't seen again at any open submission platform, but her initials kept showing up. Inside sealed casebacks, on folded corner graphs, on black coins passed from mentor to mentee. The world had not seen her speak. They had only seen what she left behind. And once seen, they couldn't look away. The wind moved slowly through the scrapyard, rattling between rusted barrels and half-buried rails. Metal whispered against itself. Beyond the fence line, the desert stretched blank and golden. In the center of the yard, beside a collapsed rig and a stack of worn, forging dies, stood a narrow metal table marked with sun stains and welding scars. Mara stood beside it, hands in her coat pockets, her shadow stretching long in the afternoon light. She hadn't changed. The same faded coat, the same slow, careful steps. No badge, no entourage. She walked with the ease of someone who didn't expect to be seen but knew she might be remembered. A younger engineer, hunched behind a half-built barrel frame, spotted her from a distance. His eyes narrowed in recognition, but he didn't call out. He just watched. Mara opened one hand and revealed a single casing, silver, clean, initials faint at the base, the same signature, the same round. She lifted the lid of a small box mounted near the table's edge. It was unmarked, save for a hand-etched phrase on a strip of tape, "Future use." Inside were fragments of disassembled parts, a folded rag, a strip of graphite, and nothing else. She placed the casing gently on top and closed the lid. No announcement, no marker, no explanation. She turned and walked back the way she came, her boots pressing shallow prints into the dirt. The engineer watched until she passed beyond the corner of the yard and disappeared behind a low bend in the fencing. He didn't follow. Miles away, on the outer edge of a live test range rarely used anymore, a technician checking the reserve benches found something strange, a folded graph, crisp and clean, tucked into the corner lip of a bench tray. Next to it, a casing untagged, quiet, initials at the base, MB. The technician picked it up, held it to the light, and looked around. There was no note, no trace, just the chart and the round. The wind stirred across the field. The technician left the graph exactly where it was, and somewhere beyond that quiet bench, past the ridgelines and fences and everything the system once tried to ignore, Mara kept walking, not toward anything loud, not toward recognition, just away, the same way she'd arrived, without question, without witness, but unmistakably seen. Mara arrived unnoticed, was mocked openly, and walked away quietly. They dismissed her before they saw her results. They erased her name before they understood her design. But in silence, she delivered more than a flawless performance. She revealed the flaw in the system itself, without protest or explanation. She let her work speak, and it echoed farther than anyone could have predicted. This story reminds us that recognition doesn't always arrive with applause. Sometimes, it lingers in the quiet after someone leaves. If you've ever been overlooked for doing something extraordinary without fanfare, this story was written with you in mind. If Mara's story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments or follow for more stories about quiet strength, unseen legacy, and the power of doing it your own way.